This is honestly one of my favorite shows to do, checking in on the stats, really breaking things down at the 10-game mark here, fresh off a double-digit win over the Portland Trailblazers. We'll dig into everything going on with the Suns. Good, bad, different, the same, all of it coming up right away on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, covering the Suns the past 5 seasons as a credentialed media member. Follow me on Twitter at Brendon Kleen 14. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen every single day. We are free everywhere. You can listen to us on any podcast platform as well as on our new, I guess I shouldn't say that anymore. It's not the newest in the world. Our YouTube channel is up and running. A few housekeeping notes as well, folks, before we really get started. Locked On Suns listener survey. It's in the description on YouTube every day. It's in the show notes on every podcast platform. It would do me a big help if you could go ahead and fill that out. It gives me some data to pull from as far as what you guys like and don't like about the show, how long you've been listening, where you listen. Just helps me out as I chart a course, I guess you could say, about this podcast. I'm looking around, as you guys can see on YouTube, to try to find our lovely Kelly Oubre bobblehead. This is our giveaway at the 1,000 mark. I also have a Suns opening night rally towel for the 500 subscriber mark. Let's get there. Let's get there together. If you do not subscribe already, please hit that button. And if you do, tell a friend who loves the Suns to listen and watch us on YouTube as well. Let's grow this together, everybody. But in the meantime, as we continue to grow all of that good stuff and create a better show, I want to do a show for you, of course, today. And as I said, we are digging into all of the stats surrounding this team. We won't just be buried in numbers today, so don't worry about that. I know you guys trust me to do both. I'm going to give you the numbers. I'm going to give you my best guess as to why the numbers have been what they have been and maybe how to fix them as we make our way through the season. It's crazy how fast the NBA season goes. I felt like I was talking for weeks about how I was excited, nervous, all of that for the regular season to begin again. And now here we are, and we're already an eighth of the way through it. So it's as good a time as any to really dive in. We'll start with Frank Kaminsky, the man of the hour, after a career-high 31 points the other night against Portland. And he is playing maybe the best basketball of his career. So I do want to start there. Today's show is brought to you by McDonald's, everybody. Proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Okay. Frank Kaminsky, again, forced into action because of the Deandre Ayton injury. I just got an email before I hit record this evening on Thursday that Deandre Ayton is once again doubtful for Friday night's game against the Memphis Grizzlies. Very peculiar situation where he was able to play. He was relatively productive, and now he's back out of the lineup. So I don't know if it got worse. The Suns have not been incredibly forthcoming. He's basically just been day-to-day, but he's missed a few games now. So Frank figures to continue to be a part of these this rotation and this team for the foreseeable future here as Ayton recovers and maybe even beyond that. But let's just set the stage first for why Kaminsky has been so impactful and how impactful he's been. So the Suns are 10 points better this season per 100 possessions when Frank is on the floor versus when he's off of it. That's the second best on-off number on the entire Suns roster. Mikal Bridges is head and shoulders above everybody else, but Kaminsky is right there in second. The rebounding has been a lot worse, as you could imagine, with Kaminsky out there, especially because that has mostly been without Deandre Ayton out there. But the half-court offense has been incredible every moment that Kaminsky has been out there. And that's not a surprise, right? I mean, he's a connector. Monty Williams has called him that forever. He can shoot. He can, at least for, a regular season player finish well inside with his size. He's in very good shape. He runs the floor. All of that makes a lot of sense. And then more specifically within that half court offense, the pick and roll stuff has been obvious for anybody who's watched. He's dishing passes himself on the short roll out to shooters, to Mikal Bridges as a cutter. He is developing chemistry with a lot of his teammates, but the numbers behind that, the Suns are generating 1.33 points per possession when Frank Kaminsky is the roll man, which is in the 82nd percentile in the NBA this season among roll men. That is elite stuff. That is, I would guess, the best that he's ever had. I mean, this is a guy, and for those of you who saw the clip going around yesterday, he was talking about this, who was basically out of the league before he got to Phoenix and rejuvenated his career. When he got his option declined, I believe, or at the very least did not get an extension from Charlotte, there was a question as to whether he'd find another team, and he obviously ended up here and has been really good. So this type of high-level elite value when he's on the floor versus off of it for the Suns is a complete revelation, and as this year so far been even better than it was last season when he was really a big part of what the Suns were doing. I think the first year in Phoenix, he was not very good, in my opinion. I mean, he played, he didn't hurt the team, but he was definitely not a huge positive. Then obviously gets hurt and then does not play very well in the bubble. Last season was pretty good, but this year, I think the big difference is his job's been even more simple. I think it gets lost a little bit that last year when he was starting and, I was complaining, I had Brandon Duenas as Zona Hoops on every week, and it seemed like he and I would almost always just sound off to one another about how tired we were of the Frank Kaminsky starting situation. But really, in reality, a lot of that was happening when Crowder or Cam Johnson were either hurt or coming back from injury. When Crowder got right and then Cam Johnson shortly after, Kaminsky didn't really play. And then obviously during the playoffs, he wasn't really a factor at all, and until game 6 of the finals. So he's basically doing less. He's doing more with less this time, and he's able to play center, which is big for him. And without Dario Saric, there's an obvious hole for what it is that he does that the Suns are able to allow him to fill, being that playmaker, being a pick and pop option for this team, which Deandre Ayton still is not, and JaVale McGee never has been. Again, I talked about the chemistry, especially with Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges. I think that's where you really see, quietly, Frank Kaminsky is one of the longest tenured players on this team. This is a guy who's been here as long as anybody outside of the young core of this group. Booker, Bridges, and Ayton are 4+ seasons. Kaminsky is now in season number 3 with this team. So Cam Johnson is there with him, as is Dario Saric. But that is a real value here. And then obviously Chris Paul can, if you can do something well, Chris Paul is going to find it and he's going to maximize it. And I think that's why you're seeing those two figure it out as well. All of that to me means he's just being used better and being put in better situations than he ever was in Charlotte, and even than he was in his first 2 seasons in Phoenix. And I think, there might be a conversation to be had when Dario Saric comes back, if he is able to play in the postseason for this team. I'm sure a lot of us would agree Saric is a better option if he's fully healthy. Maybe JaVale McGee in certain matchups is just the no-brainer option to protect the rim a little bit and have the athleticism and all of that. But in the regular season, Frank is, he's an NBA player. He deserves to have a roster spot. He deserves to have a rotation spot for this team when he comes back. And, those numbers show that it would be dumb to try to mess with this. Maybe there's a few games that it doesn't go well and you go away from it, but you have to ride the hot hand. I think we all have that lingering memory of Monty after game 6 of the finals saying he will resent himself and be disappointed in himself all summer long because he did not give Frank a chance in that final series sooner with the size that Milwaukee was able to bring. So I think we could see more of Frank at the 4 again, taking Abdul Nader's spot in the rotation. Maybe JaVale McGee plays less, but those numbers show, and obviously capped off with that 31-point night, that Frank Kaminsky has been a huge plus for this team and has to be considered a key part of this rotation for the next however long until this drops off. I don't see it ending particularly soon. I think he's really in a good place to succeed. So we'll get to the rest of the starting lineup, including DeAndre Ayton, which has gotten off to a mediocre to slowish start here yet again for the second straight season. We'll get into why the numbers are a little bit of a lie and what maybe could get a little bit better in the short term. I mean, as soon as tonight against the Grizzlies. Let's first talk about McDonald's. Who does not love McDonald's, especially McRib time? I know they always bring specialty coffees in for the holiday season. I think they usually, when is the Shamrock Shake and all of that stuff? That's around March, right? So look, they always have something to make everybody happy in terms of their food, but they're more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they have dependable Wi-Fi and an endless supply of French fries and McFlurries at an affordable price, win or lose. It's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team or the away team come to recharge, and it's the place you always look forward to stopping on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. I told you guys headed out to San Diego for my bachelor trip. It was a nice icebreaker. It's like that awkward, we're about to spend a whole weekend together. Let's start having some fun, but everybody's kind of dreading the drive. And, logistically, do you have your bag? Do you have this? We stopped at a McDonald's halfway through the drive, just enjoyed our food, enjoyed the hangout. You just are comfortable at a McDonald's. I know I'm not the only one. It just feels like I've been doing this since I was 2 years old. I'm comfortable. I love it. I enjoy myself. I know what I'm going to eat. I know what it's going to feel like. I know everybody's going to be happy. And then you're on your way. We were getting off like bandits after that. We were enjoying ourselves and ready for the trip. So head to your local McDonald's right now, the next time you need to refuel and reconnect. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Okay. Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline.ag. BetOnline remains the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. They also are back and better than ever with a new web interface for the start of the basketball season. That's not just the NBA, folks. We've been in swing with us Suns fans and NBA fans for a while, but college basketball on the men's and women's side is alive again. More props, odds, and lines over at betonline.ag than ever before, making BetOnline your number one spot throughout the rest of 2021. So head to that new updated desktop or mobile site, make an account today, and when you do, use the promo code LOCKEDON when you make your first deposit to get a 50% welcome bonus. That's promo code LOCKEDON when you make your first deposit to get a 50% welcome bonus straight to your account. From football and basketball to the NHL, boxing, and even your favorite Vegas casino games. That's right, play a little poker over at betonline.ag. Don't wait. Take advantage of all the amazing offers. Bet online, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen. We're getting our way through the next, predicting a little bit of what might happen the next 10 games here at the 10-game point of the regular season for the Suns. I want to talk about the starters because, yet again, we are looking at a situation where they are a little bit mediocre as far as lineups go for the Suns. The Frank Kaminsky at the 5 lineup, predictably, as we just talked about, has been the best high usage lineup that the Suns have put out there. They have been a relatively low lineup team. Like they are not, Monty Williams is not mixing and matching all that much. So what you're left with is, this middling starting lineup is it sticks out like a sore thumb in some ways. So I'm going to get you guys the numbers because I forgot to type them up on my note sheet, but they are right here. This with Chris Paul and Booker, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, and DeAndre Ayton on the court this season are 4.8 points worse per 100 possessions. So it's not as if they're getting killed because obviously they're 7-3, although a few of those wins now have come without DeAndre Ayton. But that's ugly. I mean, it's in the bottom quartile, the bottom 25% of all lineups in the NBA. So it's certainly not pretty. That Kaminsky lineup is really saving them, as is the all-bench lineup of Payne, Shamet, Nader, Johnson, and McGee. So let's dig into why. Because obviously they're still winning games, and so it's not as if it's a panic situation. It's not nearly as ugly as it was last year, where basically the Suns for about a month or more were only really outscoring their opponents when one of Chris Paul or Devin Booker was on the floor. So that's obviously a good sign, but the main thing to me is that DeAndre Ayton is I don't want to like put any blame on him for the 1-3 start or anything like that. I mean, we saw the defense overall just be a major issue. However, Ayton's just not been the same guy. The defense has basically been the same when he's on versus off the court. His total Raptor, which is 538, sort of all in one stat, kind of like PER, defensive, box plus minus, some of these other ones. Raptor is the 538 option, and he's a minus. And his defense is, I think, 0.4, which for those who aren't familiar, 0 is like neutral, like you're just a complete neutral, nothing, not good or bad. So for his defense to only be like a 0.4 means he's barely above average on that side. And of course, we know that's where his primary value is going to come from. McGee and especially Frank have been as good, if not more impactful. You're seeing with lineups overall where Chris Paul and Devin Booker are on the floor together. So just to give you that, because I said last season that was one of the major issues, those lineups together, almost 500 possessions this season, plus 5.9. So again, that Ayton lineup, the starting lineup, the normal starting lineup, the minus 4.8 there is dragging that down as well. So apologies, I am not meaning to clear my throat. If I could have everybody's Venmo, I will send you each $2 for having to hear my phlegm in your earbuds. I do apologize. I am good now. It's Ayton. I mean, if you go through the on-off stuff, it all points back to Ayton. And again, it's not as if the lineups with Ayton are a humongous negative. It's just that if you're going to point at anybody in that starting unit and you see that these all bench units are really good, the common denominator in a lot of those is DeAndre Ayton. I'm getting the numbers now. The Suns overall, when hit with him on the court, with him off the court, they are plus 2.8. With him on the floor, they are minus. We are loading here. They are they are plus 4.2. So it's just that incremental. It's just that incremental difference where they're a little bit better with him on the floor, but not as much as other guys. And the bench has been so good, and Kaminsky in particular has been so good. That's just one answer. I think if he can get right and get healthy and get a little bit into a rhythm, the defense will go up, because right now the Suns are 13th in defense, and that's just not where they want to be. They want to be a top 10 defense. We know they have that in them. The other part of the starting lineup stuff to me is Devin Booker, and I'll go a little bit quicker on him because I don't think I'm worried necessarily. His efficiency really is the big thing that's been down, but a lot of his misses, if you go, place by place in the court, are on rim attempts, and those are going to go in. I mean, he improved a lot last season around the basket. We know he has all of the touch. He has every shot in his bag. There's no reason to think that will stay. It's just over 50% right now, and it was up around 60 last season. So it's going to go back to normal, and I'm not worried about that too much. His assists per pass, this is something that David Nash highlighted on Twitter this week, are elite. They always have been, but he's taking that to an even bigger level this season because he has the ball in his hands a little bit more than he did last year, and he's still dishing out assists at a higher clip relative to his total dribbles and total time with the basketball in his hands. His overall assist rate is up. His turnovers have stayed basically stagnant, so he's not, trading off those assists for more turnovers. He's playing efficient in terms of controlling possessions. All that stuff is good. His threes per game are up, which I talked about a little bit in the recap of the Trailblazers game, if you want to check that episode out. But it's still very low relative to the rest of the NBA for wings. And I think, we're settling into a good chunk of possessions and years in the NBA for Devin Booker at this point. I think we just have to settle into the fact that this is a guy who's not going to take a ton of threes, who is not going to have that be a huge part of his arsenal. We probably just have to be content with the slight uptick that we've seen this year, maybe a little bit higher, but that's not his game. I think your hope at this point is that the efficiency can get back to where it is, or where we're used to it being. He takes a few more threes per game this year and makes them at a better clip, which he has so far. And then the passing and playmaking increase gets him to where he can be a better player than he was last season. Because if you look at the best season of his career to me was the season he had with Ricky Rubio in 2019-20. You add the bubble to that, and he was, incredible. If you imagine a slightly better version of that guy with the at-rim attempts going a little bit better, with more three-pointers and the same level of passing and playmaking ability, that is a borderline all-NBA player. And I think the way to get there is staring us right in the face. So clearly not giving up on the starters. They are who they are. Devin Booker is going to get better. You would imagine Deandre Ayton can be a defensive presence like we're used to. Maybe not the playoff guy, but better than last year's regular season. But I do also want to say, I want to see more of Payne Shamet and Cam Johnson in with the starters in place of Crowder as the season goes along. I want to see that Payne, Booker, Paul lineup that we saw so often during the playoffs last year. I want to see Shamet with those two, which is lineup we saw during the preseason a lot. And then obviously Cam Johnson, which we've seen for several years now with those other four core players. So I want to see those guys continue to get in there because mix it up. See if that can juice things a little bit. Maybe the defense takes another step with Cam in there instead of Crowder. I doubt that. Crowder's been very, very good this year, but we'll see. I want to see more experimentation, and the Suns now have a cushion with so many wins piled up and a little bit of a rhythm now behind them and depth and everything else, that if they can get a little bit healthier, get some of these guys back, that I think we could see them mix and match a little bit more and find some lineups that do work. All right, let's close things out talking a little bit more about that defense, because I want to dig into the numbers there. Deandre Ayton is by far not the only culprit to why things have been a little bit off on the defensive end, especially with scoring down around the NBA to start the season. The Suns defense has still been subpar relative to the standard that they've set for themselves. So I want to get into that. First, though, a quick word from Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever and my favorite protein bar. And during the holiday season, a perfect counterbalance to some of the full, exhausting meals that we have, starting with Thanksgiving. You love all the good food and treats. There's plenty of them, but maybe you want something yummy during that time of year. You have a craving. You have maybe you're out with family and you're doing meal after meal and you're like, I really don't want to put on 5-10 pounds like a lot of us do. So maybe sub in a Built Bar. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories on the low end. Most Built Bars, though, are only 130 calories with only 4 grams of sugar and plenty of protein. Sub in a coconut cream pie for a coconut Built Bar. Look, the flavors are even 1 and 1. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate. They're a great option for when you're hungry, passing the time. Maybe you have a tiny breakfast on Thanksgiving Day. You're a little hungry in that mid-afternoon time right before dinner. Maybe you put that Built Bar in and you're good to go. It definitely has come in clutch for me a time or two when I don't want to have a full meal, but I know I want to have something good in my belly between those meals. They have new surprises coming all month, and there's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday, so mark your calendars there as well. In the meantime, go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 when you make your purchase to get a 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Closing out the show, let's talk about the defense. Suns are 13th in defensive rating right now per cleaning the glass. Cleaning the glass takes out garbage time, so any blowouts, losses, or wins, that whatever happens in those minutes is taken out of the data for cleaning the glass, so it can be a little bit more accurate. We have the first issue that I want to highlight on the defensive end so far has been rebounding. They're allowing opponents to get on the offensive glass. They are middle of the pack in defensive rebounding. They are 25th in total rebounds per game. And a lot of this, honestly, though, is weighted out by the fact that they have been really bad at offensive rebounding. So I don't want to make too big of a stink about the rebounding overall, but it's just an area where they are a little bit mediocre. This is dating something they've always struggled with, but especially without Tory Craig and Dario Saric, they've slipped a little bit, even relative to last season. So I think it's just, is it the most important thing? I think this is a debate that basketball fans and coaches and everybody always have, which is how important really is ending a possession with a rebound. I think old school coaches value it a little bit more than new school coaches. As teams play smaller, it's something you just sort of know you're going to have to sacrifice. So I don't want to overstate it, but it jumps out at you when you're looking at the numbers. The other thing is that the opponent 3-point percentage has completely flipped. you could make the case. This is something we talked about on this show in our preview series quite a bit at different points, whether it was with Mo Dakhil, we talked about it. I know we talked about it on a show talking about DeAndre Ayton and just the defense overall. So it was predictable because last season the Suns got fairly lucky, you could say, by having the 5th best opponent 3-point field goal percentage, which means opponents had the 5th lowest 3-point percentage in the NBA. Very few teams had less opponent shots go in from deep than the Suns last season. And that was 36.1 last year. It's already 38% this season, which is now the 4th worst in the NBA. And you can see just from 36 to 38, there's a very small difference between, the very top of the league and the very bottom of the league, because for the most part, most teams make around 37% of their threes. And you're going to have your outliers. The other thing, though, which is maybe a little bit of bad luck, is there are things that teams do not get me wrong. And coaches would obviously tell you they're not just going to cross their fingers. They have strategies to prevent three-pointers from going in. You want to have discipline. You want to be a good closeout team, which I think the Suns are. I think there's something to be said for the length and IQ that they have on the floor at all times, that they have a hand in shooters' faces. So I'm not naive enough to say that doesn't make any difference, but the numbers would tell you that it doesn't make much of a difference. Outside of guys, outliers like Steph and Clay, team three-point shooting is almost entirely random. I think this is something Seth Partnow over at The Athletic has talked a lot about. It's a lot of this explains how there are such wild results and how, no lead. I'm sure people watching the NBA these days feels like there's no lead that's safe. That's because teams can just pour it in from deep. It's why offense has exploded. Team three-point shooting can win or lose games, and it can really determine the success of a team over the course of a full season. Now, you want to have the most talent and versatility that you can to combat that. But what I'm saying is the Suns being 5th best in the NBA last season, you could say, was good luck and was random. And the Suns being 38% this season, 4th worst in the NBA, could be totally possible over the course of this entire year because of the same thing, randomness and bad luck. So that's not great news. I think that their overall IQ and length and talent on defense, they probably will be able to pick it up a little bit. Maybe they could even be glad that they're getting this bad streak out of the way early. But all in all, the Suns being 13th in defense despite all of that is a huge win, because if they can clean up the possession battle a little bit by getting better on the glass, if Ayton can get healthy and make a little bit more of an impact, they're going to get closer to the top 10 because they're already 13th just by doing those little things. And that's even with the three-point shooting being an issue. So that's where I would say I'm still relatively optimistic or neutral, because they're 13th despite having opponents just rain in threes on them. So that speaks to their being good at everything else. And so this is where I would focus on the trade in the buyout market. The Suns need somebody to fill that Torrey Craig hole, especially, and Nader is not the guy. So I talked about trades in the past. I did a show looking at early trade candidates. I was focusing a little bit more on the offense because that was where right away to start the season, it looked like the Suns were a little wiggly. They seem to have figured that out. So I'm looking more on the defensive end now. I don't know. I mean, Torrey Craig is such a unique player with his size. I don't think those guys just grow on trees, which is why it was such a big acquisition in the first place. But a couple of guys. So Jae'Sean Tate from the Rockets. He is somebody who is big. He's not tall as Torrey Craig or as, you might like to see, and he's not very much of a shooter. But then again, neither was Torrey Craig, and he kind of got hot at the right time, and it worked out. And he was a hustle player and an energy guy and everything else, and he was able to carve out a rotation spot. So the same thing could happen there. Tate just has size. He's a little bit on the smaller end again, but maybe more of a 2-3 defender than a 3-4-5 defender like Craig was, but still a player who is a little bit on, older than the rookies and extremely young guys that the Rockets are currently playing. You could see Houston be a team that's a seller, obviously, at the deadline. And I think Tate is relatively cheap still. Maybe the Suns don't keep him long-term, but I think that's somebody to keep an eye on. The other one, which would be a little bit more of the, big game hunting, is Marcus Smart. We know the Celtics are not doing, they're flailing around a little bit. There's internal turmoil. They did just extend Marcus Smart, so he's not eligible until mid-January, but I could see him being a guy that this franchise would love to see be here in terms of culture and intensity and toughness and veteran savvy. Problem is, because of that extension, he's under contract at somewhere between $15 and $20 million for the next several seasons. That already off the top probably makes it a little bit dicier if DeAndre Ayton is going to indeed stay here past this season, and already these other guys have locked in. You're looking at a very expensive team, not to mention Cam Johnson. So Smart is probably less likely. If so, it would be sort of a rental with the intent to flip him again, which is always a scary thing to do. I don't know if the Sarver situation impacts the Suns' ability or desire to take on a lot of money this deadline. But I think those types of guys, you're probably not going to get somebody quite as big as Torrey Craig. Maybe he's not somebody who's going to be such a good rebounder as Craig was, but the energy, the veteran savvy, the toughness, those are things you can find. Those are a couple more options. I think the Suns will clearly be on the hunt for a player like that, whether it's with Jalen Smith, this roster spot, the rest of their mid-level exception. They have the tools to do it, and I think that's where I would be looking. So nothing to be terrified about. This is a 7-3 team. This is a better than average defense. It's just, you want to be elite. This team has its eyes set on a championship, and there's little ways they can continue to get better. So hopefully you got a few of those. I do not mean to be hitting any panic button. This is somewhat of a nitpicky type show, but it is always worth checking in. We are 10 games in, so worth doing for sure. Subscribe to the YouTube page, folks, if you haven't. Subscribe, follow on whatever audio platform you are on. We are heating up. The Suns are on a win streak. This is the fun stuff. We do have to talk about Robert Sarver and all that every so often, but just as much as you want to focus on the basketball, I do as well. So we will be checking in on this team as they continue to make their way up the Western Conference standings. Enjoy Friday night's game. Enjoy Sunday night's game. And I'll be back with you Sunday night to recap both of them and get back with you to start a new week. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.